Hello, I'm Marina Williams, licensed mental health counselor. I'm going to be talking to you today about the types of insurance fraud that therapists sometimes encounter. But first, I need to tell you how you can get CE credit for having seen this video. In a moment, I'm going to give you a code word that you'll need to write down. I'm then going to give a second code word at the end of this video. You will need both to get credit. After the video is over, click the link under this video. It's then going to ask you for both code words. After you enter them correctly, you will be given a short, multiple question test and provider evaluation form. After that, you'll be given your CE certificate. The first code word is ethics. E-T-H-I-C-S. Ethics. Okay, let's get started. A video explaining that you shouldn't be committing insurance fraud seems redundant, doesn't it? It sounds like a no-brainer, right? Well, before you decide that you don't need to watch this video, consider that it is estimated that $68 billion is lost to insurance fraud each and every year, and that therapists make up a good chunk of that. This means that for a lot of people, committing insurance fraud seems like the right choice, or is simply a choice that a lot of therapists succumb to eventually. I don't want that to happen to you, and here's why. Although it may seem easy and like everyone else is doing it, you will get caught eventually and you will go to jail. I don't want you to have to face your friends, family, and clients when you lose your license and can no longer be a therapist. For me, just having to face people who trusted me, believed in me, and thought I was a good person is worse than any criminal charges. But for those that fear legal consequences, keep in mind that you'll have to pay back all the money you stole, plus huge fines, and probably do jail time as well. It's simply not worth the risk. Insurance fraud is so common that I even have prospective clients ask me about it over the phone, as if it's normal procedure. They want to see which therapist is giving them the better deal, and to them, that means which therapist is willing to commit fraud for them. For prospective clients to talk about this so casually, it makes me wonder just how common fraud is amongst therapists. And that's why I decided to make this video. If clients are asking for it, it must be very tempting for therapists to deliver. But let me just reiterate that just because your clients say it's okay and are asking for it, doesn't mean it's not wrong. It's definitely wrong and will get you into a world of trouble. I'm going to describe 8 types of insurance fraud. Some of these you may not have known were insurance fraud, and some you might even be doing now. After each type, I'm going to give an example of the therapist who was caught doing this and what happened to them as a result of it. I think you'll find that you'll agree with me that it's simply not worth the risk. The first type of insurance fraud we'll be reviewing is often referred to as unbundling or double dipping. This is when a therapist performs a service, such as couples counseling, but instead of just billing one person's insurance for the couples counseling session, the therapist bills both people for an individual session. So, the therapist gets paid for 2 hours worth of services, even though they only provided 1 hour. This is also often done with family therapy. Again, instead of just charging for one family session, the therapist bills for, say, 5 individual sessions. The therapist ends up being paid for 5 hours of work instead of just the 1 hour they actually worked. The therapist is able to get away with this easily because most clients just don't know how their insurance works. In fact, I'm willing to bet that a lot of them think that's just how family therapy works. I don't do much family therapy, but couples counseling is one of the services I provide in my private practice. And I can tell you more often than not, the couple thinks I need both of their insurances and that I will be billing both of their insurances for the service. Something that I strongly believe in is educating my clients about how their insurance works and making it clear that I only need one person's insurance and that to do otherwise would be insurance fraud. If every therapist took the time, really just a couple of minutes, to explain this to their clients, soon clients would be educated enough to know that they didn't have to stand for insurance fraud. So, to some this might seem like the perfect crime. The clients already think you need to bill multiple insurances, so what's there to lose, right? The wrongdoing therapist assumes incorrectly that so long as the client doesn't know, they have nothing to worry about. What they are forgetting is that the insurance companies can figure it out pretty easily. They have an idea of what the average therapist billing is like, and when you go against it, it raises red flags for the insurance company. The average therapist doesn't have an entire family in individual therapy, and that's how they know they should investigate. Now, you might still think that you have to do this several times in order to get caught, but actually, you can get caught after just the first time. Let me tell you the story of a therapist who was caught after just trying this scheme once. Although all of the examples I'm going to be using in this video are public record, I've decided to omit the names of the therapists for the sake of privacy. An Ohio psychologist was providing a parenting evaluation for a married couple that wished to become foster parents. The psychologist not only billed the foster agency for the evaluation, but he also went ahead and billed the couple's insurance for 2 individual sessions. The psychologist has been reprimanded by the Ohio board and faces a possibility of up to 5 years in prison, a $250,000 fine, as well as having to return the money he stole. As you can see, he only did it once, and it was enough to get him caught. And clearly, the money was nowhere near worth it for him. The second type of insurance fraud we'll be reviewing is often referred to as upcoding. When billing insurance, certain services are worth more than others. So, if a therapist wants to get paid more for their time, they may bill it or code it as a service that is worth more. You up the pay by changing the billing code, thus upcoding. A lot of people think of upcoding as being more common in medical clinics, but this is one that therapists do too. The most common way that therapists upcode is they bill a half-hour therapy session as a full-hour session. Another way a therapist may upcode is, let's say the therapist does couples counseling, but the couples insurance doesn't cover couples counseling. It only covers individual counseling. Rather than not be able to bill the couple's insurance, the therapist simply bills the couple's counseling sessions as individual sessions so that he can still get paid. I have also heard of therapists billing a full hour for sessions as short as just 5 minutes. The therapist wants to get paid more, so they change the billing code. The way these therapists get caught is that they simply become prolific billers. The insurance companies start to ask themselves, is it really possible for a therapist to be seeing this many clients every week? Many of those caught were found to be billing 10 to 14 hours per day. Some even billed for more hours than there were in a day. A Tennessee psychiatrist was accused of upcoding to Medicaid. Allegedly, he was billing 45-minute sessions when he was only meeting with his clients very briefly. The psychiatrist denies any wrongdoing, but Medicaid has fined him $325,000 for insurance fraud. Although he has avoided jail time, as you can imagine, this type of accusation is devastating to a person's career. He is now looking to retire and sell his practice. Whether he is actually guilty or not, this is a consequence you want to avoid. Even though it may seem like everyone is doing it, the insurance companies can tell when something's not right, and you will get caught. And simply put, it'll be the end of your career whether you avoided jail time or not. I don't know about you, but when you look at the consequences, that's something that I really want to avoid. Another form of insurance fraud that is sometimes referred to as upcoding is when the therapist gives the client a harsher diagnosis in order to get more sessions from the insurance company. We've all had clients that long-term wanted services from a therapist, but who just weren't qualified for them under the guidelines of their insurance policy. Some therapists decide that the way to resolve this is simply to change the diagnosis to something more severe. Even if you are providing the client with a good service, you are still cheating the insurance and actually cheating your client as well. A better approach is to offer the client out-of-pocket services once their insurance runs out. It then becomes the client's choice if they feel that therapy is necessary enough to justify their own personal cost. Of course, you should try to work within the client's budget. Changing the client's diagnosis to something more severe than warranted can negatively affect your client in many ways. It can actually rob them of certain career opportunities. Some positions in the military and government are unavailable to individuals who have certain diagnoses on record. Your client may be unable to get life insurance or certain private insurance in the future because now they have a quote-unquote pre-existing condition. The diagnosis may also be used against them in a court proceeding, such as a divorce or custody battle. Not only would these things be terrible for your client, but they would also be terrible for you. As you can imagine, if your client experiences a hardship sometime in the future because you used a fake diagnosis, they're going to be very mad at you and there may be hell to pay. For instance, over 100 individuals have sued their therapists over having been diagnosed with multiple personality disorder, a diagnosis that became popular in the early 90s. One former patient won over $10 million in her lawsuit. As you can see, even if the insurance companies don't catch you, your client may. Probably the most commonly thought of type of insurance fraud is when a therapist pads their hours. Padding your hours means that you have billed for hours that you didn't work. This can be especially tempting at agencies where there is a productivity quota that the therapist has to meet each week. It can be difficult to meet this quota, and sometimes the agency will threaten that if you don't meet your quota, you'll lose your health insurance and other benefits. Believe me, I understand, and I've worked for agencies like this. One agency I had worked for 3 years, and even though I was a good and loyal employee, they dropped all my benefits because I couldn't meet my quota. I lost my health insurance, my paid time off, and all my other benefits because of a high no-show rate that was plaguing the agency. I can understand why some therapists would resort to fraud in order to avoid the same fate, but it still doesn't make it right. If your agency has a high no-show rate and a productivity quota that's virtually impossible to meet, you should work someplace else rather than commit insurance fraud. Another reason why this one is so tempting to so many therapists is because often the clients will encourage you to do it. I can remember several times where a client would call and cancel their appointment, but then say to me, "Oh, I'm so sorry I have to cancel last minute. Just bill for the session anyways. I promise I won't tell anyone." It seems that the client is trying to do you a favor, but be careful. I often wondered if the real reason for this was because a lot of the clients I had at the time had court-ordered counseling. They may have liked the idea of being able to say they were fulfilling their court-ordered duty without having to actually do it. And this may have even given them some leverage over the therapist if the therapist ever needed to fire the client due to non-compliance. Sure, some clients may have made the offer simply because they felt bad about canceling and wanted you to get paid anyways. But just because the client gives you their blessing doesn't mean it's not stealing. I always made sure to tell those clients that although I appreciated the offer, I wouldn't be billing their appointment because that would be insurance fraud and I wasn't going to break the law. It may seem like it's not a big deal to just bill for the occasional no-show in order to meet your quota, but I think the need quickly turns into greed. Once you become comfortable with occasionally stealing, it opens the door for more frequent fraud. A good example of this is a counselor from Tennessee who sometimes billed for more than 24 hours worth of services in a single day. The counselor would even bill for services after her clients were discharged. From reports, it appears that she received a lot of referrals from the Tennessee juvenile courts. Most therapists would have been happy to have such a great referral source and a steady stream of income. But, like what happens to a lot of therapists that allow themselves to commit fraud, this counselor became greedy. When asked if she did it because she was in financial trouble, she responded that she did not have any particular need for the money, which had been spent, and that she knew at the time it was wrong, but that it was just so easy to do. Of course, it seems easy now, but it's not so easy when you get caught. Your name is in the newspaper, your reputation is ruined, you're unemployed, and you're going to jail. The next 4 types of insurance fraud are not so obvious, and I know for a fact that a lot of therapists out there are doing these and don't even realize they're committing insurance fraud. Because they are so obscure, they don't make it to the newspapers. So, unfortunately, I don't have many examples to give you for these ones. Referral fees and kickbacks are pretty common practice in other professions. But did you know that it's considered insurance fraud when therapists do it? Referral fees are when a therapist collects some fee or percentage when they refer a client to another provider. Kickbacks also refer to some benefit given for referrals. This benefit could be given to the therapist for making the referral, or could be paid by the therapist for receiving the referral. A lot of therapists out there would love to buy referrals and would also enjoy receiving something in return for any referral they happen to pass along. After all, those referrals can be worth a lot in the long run. Paying for referrals would be a lot easier than paying for all that marketing and trying to build a reputation in the community. A lot of therapists probably don't see what the harm is in paying referral fees. Well, the reason why it is considered wrong is because the referrer then has an incentive to refer as many people as possible. This often leads to people receiving treatment they don't need or can't benefit from. One Florida counselor received a sentence of 48 months in prison for committing insurance fraud and paying referral fees. Allegedly, she paid halfway house owners to steer their residents to her treatment center to receive services. Most of these residents were not eligible or appropriate for the kinds of services she offered. The clients received unhelpful services, and the insurance had to pay for something that was of no benefit to anyone. Now this counselor will be in prison for 4 years, all because she wasn't willing to be patient and build her practice the right way. Another one that probably a lot of therapists don't realize is insurance fraud is when you bill a lengthy phone call with a client as a therapy session. Now, A few insurance companies will pay for something called a phone consultation, but that is quite different from having a session over the phone. The insurance companies will only pay for sessions that take place in person. They will not pay for sessions that took place over the phone, via Skype, or via email. I've gotten a lot of requests from clients to do therapy over the phone, and they have all been very surprised when I tell them that their insurance won't cover phone calls. Their genuine shock makes me think that this may be a very common type of insurance fraud. Clients can also take it very hard when you tell them that for legal reasons you cannot bill their insurance for a phone or Skype session. Many of these prospective clients have acted as though I was being unfair, turning them away, or just being difficult when I told them that I couldn't bill their insurance for phone sessions. It's important to stick to your guns in these situations. You may have to explain to the prospective client more than once that what they are asking for is insurance fraud and that you are unwilling to commit fraud, no matter what. I can remember one client that I had been seeing for about 2 months. He told me that he was moving 2 hours away from my practice, and because of the distance, wouldn't be able to make it to his weekly appointments anymore. He then asked me if I would be willing to do the sessions over the phone so that we could continue working together. I explained that his insurance wouldn't pay for phone therapy and that it would be insurance fraud if I billed them anyways. What the client then said next was surprising. He told me not to worry because he wouldn't tell the insurance company what I did. I insisted that it still would be fraud and that I wasn't willing to violate my morals. The client became very angry with me and just couldn't understand why I wouldn't do it if I was in no danger of getting caught. I even offered the client a private pay rate that he could afford, but he refused. So, sometimes our clients will even insist on us committing insurance fraud if it benefits them in some way. This can be tempting when we feel like we have the client's blessing. But remember, you're the one who's going to be in trouble if you get caught, not the client. And you may have the client's blessing now, but that may change in the future. A judge also is not going to be impressed with the excuse, but the client told me it was okay. You're supposed to be better than that. One form of insurance fraud that you probably didn't know about is when you allow your client to not pay their copays or deductibles. A lot of therapists don't realize this is insurance fraud because it doesn't seem like the therapist is benefiting from it. We usually think of insurance fraud as something that the therapist does to benefit themselves at the expense of the insurance company. So, a lot of people don't think of this one as insurance fraud because, after all, the only person losing in this deal is the therapist, right? Actually, this is wrong. The insurance company has various reasons for having copays and deductibles. One reason is so that they can offer the client a lower monthly premium by having the client be partially responsible for their own care. Another reason is because the insurance company knows that the client will be more motivated to get better in therapy sooner if they are paying at least something for that service. People tend to be more motivated if they're invested. The client may also be more hesitant to start services in the first place knowing they will have to pay that copay every week. If a client doesn't have to pay their copay, there's no reason for them to not just go to therapy every week forever. Granted, they have the time. I can say from experience that clients who don't have copays tend to be long-term clients. So yes, in this case, the insurance company is losing and the therapist is benefiting because now they have a long-term client. I think a lot of clients don't understand how their copays or deductibles work. A lot of people are also under the impression that therapists are rich and get a lot of money from the insurance. Because a lot of therapists are uncomfortable discussing fees and money with clients, the clients are never educated about the truth of these matters. I recently had a client call and tell me that she was calling various therapists and would go with the therapist that offered her the lowest copay amount. I informed the client that the therapist doesn't get to choose the copay amount and that it's up to the client's insurance. Furthermore, I would have no idea what her copay amount even was, or if she even had a copay, until I received her insurance information and called them up. The client seemed very flustered by my answer and responded that regardless, she would be going to the therapist with the lowest copay. I could see how for a lot of therapists, this would be a very tempting proposition, especially if you were new to private practice and had appointment slots to fill. I remember when I had just opened my practice and was trying to attract new clients, my husband actually suggested that I could undercut the competition by offering free copays. It wasn't until I looked into the idea that I discovered that that was actually insurance fraud and was not something I was willing to do. Sometimes we feel pressure from current clients to waive a copay or deductible. I've had many clients complain that they couldn't afford their copay and to try to make me feel guilty for having accepted it. The fact is, you have nothing to feel guilty for. The client chose their insurance plan, and typically, the higher their copay, the lower their monthly premium is. If their copay is truly a hardship and they truly can't afford it, the client has other options, such as adjusting their lifestyle or applying for insurance through Medicaid. It is not the therapist's responsibility to provide welfare to clients. And not only that, but doing so could get you in a lot of trouble. It will truly be a hardship when you've lost your license and are going to jail for insurance fraud. The last type of insurance fraud I'm going to talk to you about is a sort of flip side of giving free copays. It's added fees. I know for a fact that there are a lot of therapists in private practice that are collecting fees from their clients in addition to any copays or deductibles. Many therapists are charging some sort of fee specific for the first session. They may call this an initial fee or a setup fee. They may then charge some extra fee for every session after that. The way therapists justify this is because perhaps they feel their services are worth more, say $100. The insurance company only pays, let's just say for example, $70 of that. So, to make up for the loss, the therapist then charges the client an extra $30 per session. The way the therapist sees it, they are still doing the client a favor by letting the client's insurance pay for whatever percentage their fee is. However, this is insurance fraud, and I'll explain why. When you sign that contract with the insurance company, you agreed to provide a list of services to their customers at a certain price. You then can't charge more than that. That would be breaking your contract and defrauding the customers or that insurance company. The only way around this is to be quote unquote out of network with someone's insurance. Usually, if that person has out of network benefits, the insurance will pay for a percentage of your fee and the client will pay the rest. Because the therapist gets a higher rate, there are many therapists out there who only see clients out of network. One of the disadvantages to this is that many clients will naturally look for therapists that are in network. So the choice is yours. Collect your full fee or accept the free marketing from the insurance company and get paid a lower rate. But you can't do both. At this point, a lot of people are usually left wondering if cancellation fees or no-show fees are okay. The only answer I can give is usually. This really depends on your individual contract. A lot of the insurances recognize that therapists need to have some kind of cancellation fee in order to stay in business. However, some insurances specify in their contracts that you cannot have any fees whatsoever, and even that you can't terminate with a client due to excessive cancellations. The insurances that have that stipulation are typically the discount or Medicaid plans. So, pay special attention to your contracts before you sign them. If you feel unable to comply with a contract, it's better to let that contract go than to sign on to something you don't agree with. Does all of this sound too complicated and kind of scary? If so, keep in mind that another option open to therapists is to simply not bill insurance at all. Many therapists that commit insurance fraud do so because they don't feel they are paid enough by the insurance companies for the services that they provide. If you feel the same, know that you can charge whatever fee that you feel you are worth to private pay clients. A lot of therapists that have been in private practice for a while inevitably ditch the insurance contracts because they feel they are worth more and are unwilling to commit fraud to get it. As you can see, there's never a valid reason to commit fraud. If you want a higher rate, switch to private pay. If the client is upset about their insurance benefits, they can always take it up with their insurance company. There's no reason for you to feel guilty or to feel like you need to take matters into your own hands. It's really as simple as that. You may be wondering what you can expect if you or a coworker gets caught committing insurance fraud. The first thing you need to understand is that the insurance companies have entire departments solely devoted to detecting fraud. They analyze the insurance claims you submit and look for trends. Increases in billing, whether for you personally or for your client, catches their attention. Another thing that might tip off the insurance company is comparing the amount of billing you submit to your coworkers or just to other therapists in general. Does this therapist submit more claims than the average therapist? Why does this therapist never seem to get cancellations? Is it likely for this therapist to be seeing such a large amount of clients every day? These are questions that the insurance company asks themselves. If they determine that your billing is suspicious, they will then open an investigation. For the moment, let's assume that you work for a mental health agency. The insurance company will not just investigate you, but will probably also investigate the entire agency. Often, if there is one person at an agency committing fraud, there are others also. The insurers are well aware that there is sometimes a culture of fraud within agencies. So they will investigate everyone in the process of investigating you. Investigators will descend upon the agency, seizing records, and contacting clients to try to confirm if appointments were actually taking place, and for how long. Your coworkers may also be interviewed. Obviously, this is a huge hassle and creates problems for everyone who works at the agency. Your boss will not be happy about it. Something to note is the fact that even if you feel that you are not committing enough fraudulent claims to tip off the insurance companies, you may have a coworker that is. If you have a coworker that gets investigated, you will be investigated too by default. And any fraud you committed, even if it just happened once, will be caught and persecuted. It's important to remember that these investigators are very skilled at what they do and will find any fraud that you have committed, even if it's only 1 out of every 100 claims. Don't take that risk. Now, let's assume that you are in a solo private practice and don't have any coworkers. You rarely commit fraud, but every now and then will put in a fraudulent claim or two if you're having a down week. After all, you work for yourself, and if you don't submit these claims, you don't get paid. You're convinced that you don't commit fraud often enough for it to get picked up on by the insurance companies. This would mean that you're assuming that you can outsmart the powerful computer algorithms used to detect fraud. Also keep in mind that all of the people who get caught committing insurance fraud also thought that they too could beat the system. If they knew they would get caught, I imagine they wouldn't have done it in the first place. After all, we are talking about smart individuals with advanced degrees, but they were all still caught in the end. After you are investigated, there is no leniency. Many of those who commit fraud think that they can simply pay the insurance companies back, promise to never do it again, and that will be the end of it. They are wrong. The insurance companies will always prosecute. Insurance fraud is a felony. You will almost always have to do jail time. All of the money you stole will have to be returned. You will also have to pay huge fines. Sometimes these fines alone equal more than the amount of money that you actually took. In addition to all of this, you will also lose your professional licensure and ability to work as a therapist. Your arrest will be public record, and people will probably find the online news article about your arrest simply by Google searching your name. If you are thinking about changing professions anyways, try getting a job when you have a felony on your record. It's not easy. This is the kind of thing that can haunt you for the rest of your life. Another question I often get is what should you do if you discover that a fellow therapist is committing insurance fraud? Well, according to the ethics code, we are told that we should first talk to that person, and if they continue, then we need to report them. Talking to someone about insurance fraud can be awkward, especially if you work in the same office with the therapist. But keep in mind that a lot of therapists probably don't realize they're committing insurance fraud and may even be thankful that you let them know. I know that I would be grateful if I was unknowingly committing fraud and a fellow therapist kindly informed me. I'd feel like that therapist just saved my career. It gets trickier when the therapist is knowingly committing fraud and you're worried about retaliation. Retaliation is a real risk, which causes many people to hesitate confronting the person face to face. Another conflict is that most state fraud bureaus encourage us to report any fraud we see happening, whether we talk to the person or not. This goes in conflict with the ethics code that encourages reporting only after first talking to the person and giving them a chance to change. The advantage of reporting fraud is that you can do so anonymously, and the odds of any retaliation are much lower because of this. Because there are different recommended courses of action depending on who you ask, I recommend following your conscience. I always put the ethics code first, but in cases of fraud, the lines can be blurred. You should probably consult with a lawyer regarding the appropriate course of action if you find yourself in this situation. Let's do a quick review of the 8 types of insurance fraud typically committed by mental health therapists. The first one we talked about was unbundling. This is when a therapist bills for more than the hours he or she worked by billing a family therapy session as multiple individual sessions or a couples counseling session as 2 individual sessions. Because most clients think that this is standard practice, the therapist thinks they can get away with it easily. It may seem like easy money at first, but everyone regrets it after they inevitably get caught. The second type of insurance fraud we discussed was upcoding. Upcoding is when you bill a session as something else in order to get paid more. Some therapy interventions, such as intakes and family therapy, get reimbursed at a higher rate than just regular individual therapy. So, therapists will bill for those higher paying interventions in order to make more money for their time. More commonly, however, a therapist upcodes by billing a half session as a full session. These therapists get caught when the insurance company realizes that the therapist is billing more than the average therapist. Another way of committing insurance fraud is when a therapist changes the client's diagnosis to something more harsh in order to get the insurance company to pay for more therapy. This can get confusing because sometimes this is also referred to as upcoding, but it is different. The therapist isn't necessarily billing for sessions that didn't take place, but they are attempting to get approval for sessions that the insurance company would not have deemed necessary otherwise. Problems from this arise when the client has difficulty getting a job or winning in court because you put a false diagnosis in their medical record. Many therapists have been sued by former by former clients over this. Probably the most commonly thought of type of insurance fraud is when a therapist pads their hours. Padding your hours refers to billing for sessions that never took place. This is often done by therapists that have a productivity quota at work and are a few hours short. So, they simply bill for sessions that never happened to make up for the difference. The problem with this is though it starts out with a few extra hours here and there, many therapists go over the deep end when they see how easy it is to commit fraud. As I've mentioned before, if you do this, you will be caught, and it won't be so easy when you're unemployed and sitting in prison. Although referral fees and kickbacks are rather common in other professions, they are considered fraud in this one. The reason being that when you provide an incentive to give a referral, it often means that people end up receiving services that aren't right for them or that are unnecessary. I'm a strong believer that people should go into therapy of their own free will and shouldn't be coerced. By taking or giving referral fees, you're taking advantage of vulnerable people. Billing a lengthy phone call as a therapy session is another common form of insurance fraud committed by therapists. We devote a lot of time to our clients, and therapists want to be paid for that time. I also get a lot of requests from clients regarding doing phone or Skype sessions. However, most insurances will not pay for that. In this case, it's best to try to get the client to come in for an extra session or pay for phone therapy out of pocket. But you cannot bill their insurance for that. Our last two types of insurance fraud are probably less commonly thought of as fraud by therapists. They're when the therapist either waives copays and deductibles for clients or adds some fee on top of the client's deductible or copay. Both practices are breaking your contract with the insurance company. When you sign that contract, you were agreeing to provide services in a particular manner and at a particular price. As I mentioned earlier, the only way to escape all of this is to either work pro bono or to accept private pay only and get off the insurance panels. Of course, there are still ways of defrauding private pay clients, but that's outside the scope of this video. Well, that concludes our CE training on the 8 types of insurance fraud. I hope you enjoyed it and now agree that fraud is simply not worth the risk. In order to get CE credit for having seen this video, you're going to need 2 code words. I gave you the first one at the beginning of the video, and I'm going to give you the second one now. The second code word is legal. L-E-G-A-L. Legal. You'll need to click the link below this video and enter the 2 code words. You will then be asked to fill out an evaluation form and a short multiple question test. If you get a passing grade, you will be given your CE certificate. I hope that you enjoyed today's video and will join me again for more great CE videos.